The silent class training hall was bright and cold, filled with the low hum of power lines running through the walls. Rows of young alien cadets sat in silence, their strange eyes fixed on the front of the class. Each desk was polished metal, and each cadet sat stiffly, their skilled, orphered faces betraying nervous energy. They were not afraid of the lesson. They were afraid of the subject. Today's lecture was about Earth, and Earth was not spoken of lightly. The instructor, an older alien with dark ridges along his head, stood before them. His hands were folded neatly behind his back, his tall frame unmoving. He had the aura of a veteran, someone who had seen more than what was written in the academy books. His name was Instructor Vare, and when he spoke, the room always fell still. But before he could even begin, a sound broke the silence. It was the voice of a cadet, young, soft, and curious. She raised her hand slowly, her pale green skin glowing under the white lights. Her voice was almost trembling, but her words were clear. "What's the kill ratio for a single Earth Marine?" she asked. The question seemed to slice the air apart, and every head turned towards her. For a long moment, there was no sound. The cadets blinked at her in shock, their breathing shallow. Some tilted their heads in disbelief. Others leaned back as if the words themselves carried danger. One cadet even dropped his stylus onto the desk, the small clatter echoing in the silence. The instructor's black eyes narrowed, but he did not speak right away. He allowed the silence to stretch. Heavy and uncomfortable, the young cadet shifted nervously in her seat, but did not lower her gaze. The class was silent, and in that silence lay fear. Fear of the stories they had heard. Fear of the numbers whispered in dark corners of the barracks. Earth Marines were a subject that lived half in legend, half in classified reports. Some cadets had heard they could wipe out entire squads alone. Others believed it was only propaganda, exaggerated tales meant to frighten enemies. But deep down, every cadet knew there was some truth to it. Instructor Vare finally spoke, his voice deep and steady. "You wish to know the kill ratio of a single Earth Marine," he repeated slowly. His words carried weight, and every cadet leaned forward unconsciously. He walked slowly along the front row, his hands still clasped behind him. The sound of his boots striking the metal floor was the only rhythm in the room. "Numbers are dangerous things," he said. "They can make you careless if they are too high, or hopeless if they are too low." He stopped walking, his gaze settling on the cadet who had asked the question. Her name was Lyra, one of the youngest in the class. Her bright eyes were filled with honest curiosity, not arrogance. And that curiosity had dragged the whole room into tension. Still, the instructor continued, "Your question deserves an answer." He turned back to the class, his voice growing harder. "Do any of you know what an Earth Marine is trained to be?" The cadets exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared speak. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their tails or tendrils twitching nervously. The instructor gave a faint, humorless smile. "They are trained to be more than soldiers," he said. "They're trained to endure, to adapt, and to fight as if the universe itself is against them." His words echoed against the cold walls, filling the silence with a heavy truth. The cadets listened, their earlier whispers forgotten. One cadet in the back swallowed hard. Another clutched his datapad tighter. Even though no numbers had been given, the weight of the answer was already pressing on them. The room felt smaller, as if the mention of Earth Marines had drawn invisible walls closer. Instructor Vare paused, his expression unreadable. He could see the effect of his words, but he was not finished. "You want a number," he said at last, his voice low and sharp. "You want to know how many fall before one Marine." He let the question hang, daring anyone to speak, but the silence only deepened. Lyra's throat felt dry, but she did not look away. The other cadets stared at her with a mix of awe and fear. No one had ever dared to ask this question in class before, and now, every one of them was trapped in the moment she had created. The instructor finally stepped back to the center of the room. He stood tall, his shadow stretching across the floor. His voice dropped lower, almost like a warning. Some battles record 100-1, he said. Some reports claim more, much more. A ripple of shock went through the room, gasps breaking the silence. But numbers are not the truth. He added quickly, the truth is that Earth Marines do not think in numbers, they think in survival. The cadets shifted, whispering nervously now. Lear felt her pulse race, her skin tingling with both pride and fear. The weight of her question had changed the atmosphere of the entire hall. The instructor raised a hand and the whispers died instantly. Remember this, he said, his voice final and absolute. When you face a Marine, do not ask about kill ratios. Ask yourself instead if you are ready to face something that refuses to die. The class fell back into silence. But this silence was different from before. It was not the silence of boredom or routine. It was the silence of fear, the silence of respect, and every cadet in that hall knew one thing with certainty. The legend of the Earth Marines was not just legend, it was a warning carved into history. And they were foolish to forget it. Asterisk the legend of Earth Marines, asterisk the silence in the hall did not break. The cadets sat frozen, their minds turning with fear and curiosity. Instructor Veer stood still at the front, his dark eyes studying every face. He knew what they were thinking. He had seen the same look many times before. The question about Earth Marines always led to the same storm inside young minds. He let the moment hang, then slowly began to speak. Again, you wish to know about Marines? He said, his voice calm yet heavy. You wish to know if the stories you whisper at night are true. He paced along the rows, his boots clicking against the cold metal floor. Every step echoed like a drumbeat, pulling their attention tighter. Marines are not numbers. They are not weapons. They are not machines, he said. They are human. But that is what makes them dangerous. Some cadets frowned in confusion. Others leaned closer, desperate to understand. The instructor turned sharply and fixed his eyes on them. Humans are born fragile, weaker than most species in the galaxy. He explained, they have no claws, no armor, no natural strength to rival predators. But it is in that weakness that they found strength no one could match. A cadet with skilled skin raised a trembling hand. Instructor, if they are weak, then how do they fight empires? He asked. The class turned toward him, waiting for the rebuke. But Instructor Veer nodded slowly, as if the question pleased him. That, he said, is the story of Earth Marines. He walked to the center of the room and clasped his hands behind his back again. Long before your time, he began. The galaxy thought humans would break. They came from a small world, a blue world filled with oceans, storms, and hardships. They struggled against their own planet. For survival, every day was a war against hunger, against cold, against the wild. From that constant fight, they learned something no other race did. They learned how to never quit. The cadets were quiet, their ears drinking every word. The young Lyra, who had asked the first question, felt her chest tighten. She had heard whispers, but never with this much detail. The stories sounded less like legend and more like truth. The instructor's voice lowered, growing darker. When humans took to the stars, they were not the strongest or the smartest, he said. But when they fought as if losing was death itself. They built the Marines not to win battles quickly, but to make sure they never lost. One Marine against 100, one squad against 1,000 still, they fought. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink into every young mind. Do you know what happens when a Marine faces impossible odds? He asked. No one spoke, their throats dry, their hands stiff on their desks. The instructor's lips curved into a grim smile. They adapt, he answered. They use every rock, every shadow, every weakness, and when nothing is left, they use themselves as the weapon. The class shifted uncomfortably, unease spreading like a shadow. Bear continued, his voice cold and certain. There are records of entire battalions crushed by a handful of Marines. Entire fleets retreating when they heard one Marine company was on the planet. Some called them demons, some called them monsters. But the truth is simpler. They are survivors, and survival makes them unstoppable. A murmur passed through the cadets, some whispering, others shaking their heads. One cadet whispered too loudly, "It cannot be true. One soldier cannot do that." The instructor's gaze snapped to him, sharp as a blade. "You think it is myth?" Vare asked, his voice low. "Then tell me, cadet, why do empires twice Earth's size still tread carefully around a single Marine division?" The cadet had no answer. His mouth opened then closed again. His face flushed with shame, and he lowered his eyes quickly. Vare turned back to the class, his voice rising slightly. "Humans are not special because of their numbers, nor their weapons," he said. "They're special because they never accept defeat, even when defeat is certain. And that is what makes Earth Marines legends." The cadets sat still, their expressions filled with unease. Some felt fear prickling in their chests. Others felt a strange respect. Lyra's hand trembled on her desk, but her eyes were wide and shining. She was young, yet something about the story burned inside her. She wanted to know more, to hear what had really happened when Marines first faced the galaxy. Instructor Vare noticed her, and he gave a slight nod. He knew her curiosity was dangerous, but also important. For knowledge was a weapon sharper than any blade. He turned away and faced the bright wall screen at the front. Slowly, he pressed a control, and the screen flickered to life. Images filled the room, old footage pulled from secure archives. The cadets leaned forward, breath caught in their throats. They saw ruined cities, burning skies, and soldiers in dark armor moving like shadows. They saw Marines holding lines against waves of alien forces. The footage was grainy, but the truth was clear. The instructor's voice echoed over the images. "This," he said, "is not myth. This is history. And if you wish to understand Earth Marines, you must see what they have done, not what is whispered." The cadets' eyes widened, their hearts pounding. Even the skeptics could not deny the power in the footage. The legend was no longer just words, it was alive before their eyes, and, for the first time, many of them realized the truth. If they ever met a Marine, numbers would not save them. First encounter the hall was dark except for the glow of the screen. The cadets leaned forward, their hearts racing as the footage began. It was old, but even through the static and scratches, the terror of the moment was clear. This was not a training simulation. This was war, and it was the first time the galaxy had faced Earth Marines. Instructor Vare's voice carried over the images. "This was the first encounter," he said slowly. "It happened on the colony world of Dravos 4. The screen showed a vast battlefield, craters torn deep into the ground, skies lit with fire. The cadets could almost smell the smoke, almost hear the screams hidden in the footage. Dravos 4 was supposed to be an easy conquest. The alien empire had sent 3 legions, tens of thousands of soldiers. They had crushed resistance across other systems with little effort. They believed humans would be no different. To them, Earth was just another small planet that dared to expand afar. But when the legions landed, they found something unexpected. Not an army waiting for them, not fleets in the sky, only a handful of Marines, fewer than 100. The alien commanders left, certain it would be over in minutes. They thought the humans were sending sacrifices, not soldiers. The footage shifted, showing the Marines, armored figures, tall and heavy with weapons, but not machines. They moved with a strange calm, not fast, not loud, but steady. One Marine crouched near rubble, his visor glowing faintly in the smoke. Another stood tall, weapon in hand, scanning the horizon. Their faces were hidden, but their presence filled the air like storm clouds. The cadets in the hall whispered nervously, 100 Marines against legions. It was impossible. And yet, the silence of the footage told them it was not impossible at all. It was real. It had happened. Instructor Vare continued, his tone sharp. "The legions expected surrender," he said. "They offered mercy if the Marines would lay down arms." The screen showed a recording of the moment, the alien commander's voice booming. "Submit and live." The voice demanded, "Resist and be erased." For a moment, the Marines did not move. Then one raised his weapon, aimed, and fired. The enemy commander fell, and the war began, the hall filled with gasps. The cadets could not believe such defiance. To kill the enemy leader in front of tens of thousands was madness. But it was not madness for a Marine. It was their way. The footage blurred as the battle raged. Explosions lit the skies. Gunfire roared. Shadows moved through smoke. The Marines fought like no soldiers the cadets had ever seen. They did not wait for orders. They did not retreat. They struck with precision, cutting through the enemy ranks like blades through cloth. One Marine was shown sprinting across open ground. Fire raining all around him, he dove into a cluster of enemy soldiers, his weapon spitting light. When the weapon emptied, he drew a blade, cutting through armor as if it were paper. Even when surrounded, he did not stop. When he fell, he dragged enemies down with him. The cadets stared wide-eyed, their jaws tight. They were trained soldiers, but nothing in their training looked like this. This was not discipline alone. It was fury wrapped in strategy. It was survival burning like fire in the human soul. The footage shifted again, showing the battlefield after hours of fighting. The legions had expected a quick victory, but instead, their numbers had thinned. Hundreds of their soldiers lay scattered. In the dirt, the Marines still stood, bloodied but unbroken. Their kill ratio was beyond reason. Instructor Ver spoke again, his voice low. This was when the galaxy first learned what a Marine was. He said, not a soldier, not a number, but a storm. The cadets shivered, feeling the weight of his words. The screen showed enemy commanders in panic, pulling back their forces, entire legions retreating from less than 100 humans. Lyra's eyes were wide, her hands trembling on her desk. She could hardly breathe. The images burned deeply into her mind. She whispered under her breath, How can they fight like that? The cadet next to her gave no answer. He was pale and silent. The instructor turned off the footage, plunging the room into half darkness. Only the low hum of the power lines filled the silence again. He looked across the class, his gaze sharp as a blade. You have now seen the truth, he said. No number can explain it. No report can capture it. A Marine does not measure battles in kills. They measure it in survival. The cadets sat in heavy silence, their minds racing with fear and wonder. Some wanted to deny it, to call it myth, but their eyes had seen the proof. Others felt their stomachs twist with unease. If 100 Marines could stop legions, what would one Marine mean on a battlefield? Lyra swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. Instructor, she asked, did they win? Ver's expression hardened, and for the first time his voice grew softer, almost sorrowful. No, he said, they did not win. He paused, letting the silence weigh down on them. They survived long enough for their fleet to arrive, long enough to turn the war. But survival came at a cost. The class waited, breathless, as he added, of the Marines who fought on Bravest 4, only 12 were left standing. The silence that followed was heavier than before, and, in that silence, the legend of Earth Marines grew even darker. The impossible battle asterisk. The hall was heavy with silence. The cadets sat frozen, their eyes still wide from the images of Bravest 4. Instructor Ver did not rush. He let the silence settle deep inside their minds. He knew the lesson was not just about history. It was about fear, respect, and survival. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady and cold. You have seen the first encounter, he said. But that was only the beginning. The cadets shifted uneasily, their hands tight on their desks. What could possibly follow after such madness? Ver stepped closer to the center of the hall, his shadow long under the bright ceiling lights. The impossible battle came next, he said. A battle that every commander swore could not be won, and yet, it was not lost. The cadets leaned forward, their breaths shallow, their imaginations already painting a picture darker than any screen could show. He tapped the console, and the wall screen lit up again. This time, the images showed a barren world, red skies and jagged stone everywhere. Smoke rose from the mountains, and broken ships burned in the distance. This was the siege of Caradon Ridge, Bear said. It is a place where numbers mean nothing. The cadets watch as the footage. Soonton, a marine outpost perched on a ridge of stone, barely fortified. Round it, endless waves of alien soldiers stretched across the land. Tanks, walkers, and artillery filled the horizon like a swarm of steel. It looked like a flood ready to swallow a stone. The instructor's voice dropped lower. There were 70 Marines on that ridge, he said. 70 against 50,000, the cadets gasped, disbelief flashing in their eyes. Some shook their heads, whispering, impossible, under their breath. But the screen told no lies. It showed the Marines preparing calmly, their weapons loaded, their armor scarred, but functional. They worked like clockwork, each one knowing their place. No panic. No hesitation, only quiet readiness. Their leader, a tall Marine captain, stood at the edge of the ridge, his visor glowing. His voice was calm as he spoke into the comms. Hold the line, no matter what. The battle began with fire raining from the skies. Artillery blasts shook the ridge, throwing dust and stone into the air. The Marines held their ground, shields glowing, armor dented. They fired back with precise strikes, cutting down enemy waves. Every shot counted, every movement sharp and exact. But the enemy was endless. For every soldier that fell, 10 more pressed forward. The cadets could see the ridge shrinking under the weight of the attack, and yet, the Marines did not break. They moved like a single living machine, covering each other, fighting as one. One Marine was shown holding a heavy gun, firing until the barrel glowed red. When the weapon overheated, he tossed it aside and drew a blade, charging into enemy ranks. He fought hand to hand, refusing to step back. Another Marine dragged a wounded comrade behind cover, firing with one arm while lifting the soldier with the other. Every frame of the footage was survival written in blood. The cadets whispered, their voices tight with awe and dread. How could 70 fight 50,000? One muttered. Instructor Vare heard, and his answer was sharp. Because they are Marines, he said, and Marines do not measure odds. Hours passed. In the battle, the ridge turned into fire and ruin, bodies scattered everywhere. The enemy kept coming, screaming with rage, desperate to crush the humans. But the Marines refused to fall, even when their weapons broke. They fought with blades, with fists, with sheer will. The footage slowed, showing a Marine covered in blood and dust. He was wounded, his armor cracked, but he stood tall. He lifted a signal beacon high into the air, defying the storm around him. It was the call for help, the signal for the fleet. The cadets realized the truth. This was not just a battle. It was a stand to buy time. The enemy surged harder, desperate to silence the beacon. But the Marines formed a circle around it, their bodies the last wall. One by one, they fell. But the circle did not break. Every Marine who dropped was replaced by another, until only a handful remained, standing in the ashes of the ridge. Finally, the skies above split open. Earth's fleet descended, weapons blazing, fire raining from the heavens. The enemy broke, scattering in terror. The ridge was saved, but at a cost no one could ignore. Instructor Vare's voice was quiet now, almost like a whisper. Of the 70 Marines, only 9 survived that battle, he said. But they did not retreat. They did not surrender. They held the line until the sky itself came to their aid. The cadets sat in silence, their faces pale, their hearts pounding. They had heard of bravery, they had heard of sacrifice, but this was something different, something beyond the limits of belief. The impossible battle was no longer just a story. It was carved into their minds. Lyra sat frozen, her hands tied against her chest. She could not decide if she felt fear, or respect, or both. Her voice shook as she whispered, "They fight even when they know they will die." Instructor Vare turned his gaze to her, his face like stone. "They do," he said, "and that is why they are the most dangerous force in the galaxy." The hull was silent again. But in that silence, every cadet carried the weight of Caradon Ridge. And none of them would ever forget what they had seen. Asterisk. Fear and respect. Asterisk. The cadets sat frozen in their seats, The tale of Caradon Ridge weighed heavily in their hearts. 70 Marines against 50,000, and 9 walking away alive. It was more than courage, more than madness. It was something the cadets could not put into words. Instructor Vare let the silence linger before he spoke again. After Caradon Ridge, he said, the galaxy began to change. His voice was low but sharp, cutting through the thick air of the hall. No empire, no fleet, no army looked at Earth the same way again. Fear spread first. But soon after came something far stronger: respect. He pressed the console, and new images filled the wall screen. Not of battles this time, but of alien fleets turning away, commanders withdrawing their legions, entire invasions cancelled. Not because of overwhelming defenses, not because of treaties, but because of rumors that Marines were there. The cadets leaned forward, trying to understand. Could mere whispers stop fleets? Could a rumor hold an empire? Vare's voice answered their thoughts. Steady and certain, yes, he said, because every commander knew the truth. Marines did not win with numbers, they won with survival. And no general wanted to waste soldiers against something that could not be broken. The screen shifted again, showing captured recordings, alien officers whispering in private chambers, voices filled with unease. One said, if there is even one Marine down there, we cannot afford this war. Another said, their presence changes everything, even logic. The cadets exchanged uneasy glances, their skills and feathers twitching. It was one thing to hear stories, another to see leaders tremble at them. Vare paced slowly, his boots echoing in the quiet hall. Some called them demons, others called them cursed, he said. But in truth, they were neither. They were human, and humans fight with something far beyond fear. The cadets felt his words strike deep. For the first time, many of them understood the difference. He stopped pacing, turning his eyes to the young faces before him. You must know this, he said firmly. Marines fight for survival, yes, but also for something more. They fight for one another, and that is why they cannot be measured in numbers. The cadets listened, their breath slow. Some nodded faintly, though they could not explain why they agreed. The footage shifted once more, this time to civilian colonies. The cadets saw children running to greet Marines returning from battle. They saw crowds cheering, not in fear, but in gratitude. The humans looked at their Marines not as monsters, but as guardians. It was a sight that confused the cadets deeply. One cadet whispered under his breath, how can killers be heroes? Instructor Vare heard him, and he turned sharply. Because they do not fight for glory, he said. They fight so their people can live, so their homes remain safe. His words hit the hull with weight. The cadets fell silent again, unable to argue. Lyra's eyes stayed fixed on the screen. She felt her heart beating faster, her mind filled with questions. Humans were strange, terrifying, but also admirable, she whispered softly. So they are feared by enemies, but loved by their own. The instructor gave her a single nod. That is the truth, he said. And that truth is what makes them unstoppable. The cadets shifted in their seats, uneasy with the idea. To them, soldiers were weapons, tools of conquest. But here was a force that was not just a weapon, it was a shield. And shields, they realized, were harder to break than swords. Vare's tone darkened, pulling their attention back. Respect is not given easily in war, he said. It is earned in blood, in battles that no one else would dare fight. The Marines earned it, battle after battle, by doing what no one believed possible. He paused, his voice like a knife. And that respect has turned into something far greater than fear. The cadets leaned forward, their curiosity burning now. What greater than fear? One whispered. The instructor's eyes hardened, his gaze sweeping across them. Deterrence, he said, the word heavy in his mouth. Entire wars have been avoided because no commander wanted to test the Marines again. Think about that peace bought not by treaties, but by the memory of their survival. The hall fell into silence once more. The cadets stared at the glowing screen, showing fleets retreating into the stars. Their minds replayed the impossible battles, the endless survival. And for the first time, they understood why Earth Marines were not just soldiers, they were a legend, a shadow that stretched across the galaxy. Lyra felt her chest tighten, her hands trembling on her desk. She whispered to herself, what kind of enemy can stand against them? But no one had the answer, not even Instructor Veer, for even he knew that question had never truly been tested. The instructor turned off the screen, leaving the hall dim once again. His voice dropped to a near whisper. Fear may fade, respect may linger, but the lesson remains the same. Never underestimate a Marine. Not in war, not in peace. The cadets sat in silence. But this silence was heavier than all the silences before. It was not only fear now, it was respect, and respect, they knew, was far more dangerous. Asterisk the question returns asterisk the hall remained dim. The cadets sat in silence, their thoughts trapped between fear and respect. Instructor Veer stood tall, his shadow stretching across the floor. The stories of Marines had already shaken them, but the lesson was not finished. Not yet. He turned his gaze to the class, his black eyes sharp. You came here seeking numbers, he said slowly. You wanted to know the kill ratio of a single Marine? His voice echoed through the hall, each word like a blade. Now tell me, do numbers matter anymore? The cadets looked at one another, their faces pale. Some shook their heads, some stayed frozen. No one dared to answer. Not after all they had seen. They had watched legions fall, fleets retreat. They had seen survival where no survival should exist. Lyra sat trembling in her seat. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her eyes never left the instructor. She had asked the forbidden question, and though she had received pieces of an answer, the truth still pulled at her. Her voice cracked as she whispered, but what is the number? The class turned sharply toward her. Gasps filled the room, claws and tails twitching with unease. The question had returned, the same words that had broken the silence before. What is the kill ratio for a single Earth Marine? She asked, again, louder this time. Her voice echoed through the metal hall, defiant and trembling at once. The silence that followed was suffocating. The other cadets looked at her with shock, anger, even fear. Why ask again? Why push the question when the truth was already terrifying? But Lyra's eyes burned with determination. She wanted the real answer. Not whispers, not shadows. Instructor Veer studied her carefully, his face unreadable, his silence long. Then, slowly, he stepped closer, each boot step heavy on the metal floor. He stopped in front of her desk, his tall frame casting her in shadow. The entire class held its breath. You want the truth, he said, his voice quiet but sharp. The truth is this: there is no number. The cadets blinked in confusion, whispers rippling through the hall. Lyra's lips parted, her question breaking free again. How can there be no number? Veer's gaze hardened, his words striking like steel. Because numbers cannot measure a Marine, he said. Some battles show hundreds to one, some thousands to one, but the ratio does not matter, because it does not define them. They are not defined by how many they kill, they're defined by the fact they do not stop. The cadets sat stunned. The answer was worse than numbers. It meant Marines could not be measured, could not be calculated. Strategy depended on numbers. Wars were fought with numbers. But here was a force beyond mathematics, beyond logic. Veer straightened, his voice rising now. Do you understand what that means? He demanded. It means a commander cannot plan against them, cannot predict them. It means fear alone can turn fleets away before a single shot is fired. And that, he said, lowering his voice again, is why your question is dangerous. Lyra's throat tightened, but she did not look away. Her mind burned with curiosity, even as fear pressed against her. But, instructor, she whispered, if not numbers, then what is their strength? Veer's face grew grim, his eyes cold as stone. Their strength is will, he answered. They fight not for conquest, but for survival, and survival makes them unstoppable. The cadets shivered at his words. A cold wave passed through The hall, heavier than any silence before, some bowed their heads, unwilling to meet his eyes. Others clenched their hands, trying to steady themselves. But no one spoke, not even in whispers. The instructor stepped back, pacing slowly. His voice was quieter now, but carried deeper weight. Numbers are comfortable, he said. They give commanders the illusion of control. But when facing a Marine, control does not exist. Battles become chaos. Survival becomes legend. The cadets sat still, their young faces filled with awe and dread. They were soldiers in training, raised to believe in tactics, ratios, and strategy. Now all of that felt fragile, shattered by the truth of one human soldier. The thought that one Marine could unbalance entire wars was terrifying, but also, strangely, inspiring. Lyra lowered her gaze, her chest heavy. She had received her answer, but it was not the one she had expected. She wanted a number, something simple, something that could be written and memorized. Instead, she received something greater, something she could not escape, the understanding that Marines were not numbers at all, but forces of nature. Vare stopped pacing, his eyes scanning the class one last time. Remember this lesson, he said firmly. Do not think of kill ratios. Do not think of numbers. Think only of the fact that when you face a Marine, you face the impossible. His words echoed, heavy and final. The cadets bowed their heads, the weight of the answer pressing down like stone. The hall was silent again. But this silence was filled with fear, with respect, with realization. The question had returned, and the answer had changed them all. Asterisk the lesson, asterisk the hall was silent. The cadets sat with their heads bowed, their minds heavy with the truth. The forbidden question had been asked again, and the answer had struck deeper than any number. There was no kill ratio, no equation, no comfort in calculation. There was only survival, only will, only the legend of the Marines. Instructor Vare stood tall at the front, his black eyes swept across the class, sharp and unyielding. He saw the fear in their faces, but also something else, a new understanding, a respect they did not want to admit. The lesson had reached them, even if their pride resisted. He clasped his hands behind his back, his voice low and steady. You came here as cadets, he said. You came here to learn how to fight wars, how to read numbers, how to make strategies. He paused, his gaze like a blade cutting through the silence. But war is not only numbers, war is survival. The cadets shifted, their bodies tense. Some wanted to look away, but they could not. His voice pulled them in, each word sharp, each word final. You must understand this, he continued. When you face a Marine, you do not fight soldiers, you fight the very idea of survival itself. The hall felt colder. The cadets felt smaller, the weight of his words pressed on their shoulders. Even the air seemed heavier, carrying the echoes of every story they had been told. Vare turned slowly, his boots clicking against the floor. He faced the wall screen, dark now, but still carrying the shadows of the battles shown. Fear is powerful, he said softly. Respect is greater. But the greatest weapon of the Marines is neither. It is the lesson they carry into every battlefield. The cadets waited, their breaths shallow. Every heart in the room thudded in unison. The instructor's voice lowered, almost a whisper now. That lesson is simple, he said. Do not stop. Do not surrender. Do not die. The words struck like thunder. The cadets felt chills run through their bodies. It was not a motto, not a chant. It was survival turned into law, the kind of law that reshaped entire wars. Vare turned back to the class, his face carved in stone. Marines are feared because they kill, he said. They are respected because they endure. But they are unstoppable because they refuse to end. He let the words hang, sharp and final. The silence after was deafening. Lyra's eyes burned with emotion. Her hands trembled on her desk, her chest heavy. She had asked the question. She had received the answer. But the answer had changed her, broken something inside her, and rebuilt something stronger in its place. Asterisk. She raised her hand one last time. The cadets turned toward her, uneasy. But her voice was not trembling now. "Instructor," she asked, "what should we do if we ever face them?" The room held its breath. It was the question every cadet was too afraid to ask. But it was the question that had lived in their hearts since the lesson began. Their's gaze locked on her, his eyes dark and steady. His answer came sharp, like the edge of a blade. "Pray you never do," he said. His words cut through the silence, heavy and final. The cadets felt the weight of them crash inside their minds. It was not advice, not strategy, but truth that chilled them more than any battle plan ever could. The hall was silent again. But this silence was different from all before. It was not only fear, not only respect, it was the silence of realization, the silence of cadets who knew they had glimpsed something far greater than themselves. Instructor Veer stepped back, his voice rising once more. "Remember this day," he commanded. "Remember what you saw. Remember what you heard. Do not forget the truth of the Marines. Do not forget the lesson of survival." The cadets nodded slowly, some with fear, some with awe, but none with doubt, for doubt had no place left inside them. The truth had carved it away, leaving only certainty. The instructor turned and walked to the door. His tall frame vanished into the shadows of the hall. The cadets remained seated, silent and heavy. No one spoke. No one dared break the weight of the moment. The lesson was over, but the echo of it remained. Lyra lowered her gaze to the desk, her heart still pounding, her mind burning. She had asked the question others feared, and she had received an answer that could never be forgotten. The answer was not a number, but something far greater. The cadets left the hall one by one, their footsteps quiet, their faces pale. Each carried the story like a shadow. Each carried the warning like a mark. And though they were young, though they were only students, they would never think of war the same way again. The class was silent until she asked, and after the answer, it would never be silent in their minds again.